Back in the 19th century, the heart of Africa was one of the last great mysteries on Earth. We're talking about massive blank spaces on the map, and those blanks were a siren call to adventurers, promising fame, fortune, and glory. And wow, few stories from that time are as epic, as brutal, or as important as the one told in Henry Morton Stanley's book, Through the Dark Continent. It's this incredible saga of exploration, sure, but it's also a deeply disturbing account of what it actually costs to fill in those blank spaces.
So this is the guy, Henry Morton Stanley, the man at the very center of this storm. By 1874, he was already a global celebrity for finding the lost missionary Dr. David Livingstone. But the journey he was about to embark on, it would make that look like a walk in the park. Bankrolled by two of the biggest newspapers in the world, he set out to solve the final great puzzles of Central Africa. And let me tell you, it was a mission that would demand almost superhuman endurance and, as we'll see, inflict an absolutely staggering amount of cruelty.
So what on earth could possibly motivate a man to plunge back into a continent that had almost killed him before? I mean, really. For Stanley, the answer was deeply personal. It all started with the ghost of a dead hero.
In his own words, Stanley wrote that hearing about Livingstone's death just lit a fire in him, a resolution to complete his work, to be the next martyr to geographical science. It's incredible, right? He saw himself as the one chosen to pick up this fallen torch. This was a sacred duty, a way to finish what the great doctor had started. For Stanley, this wasn't just another assignment, it was a calling.
Okay, so the official mission, funded by the Daily Telegraph in London and the New York Herald, had two very clear objectives. First, tackle the big geographical questions. Get out there and finally, definitively chart the Great Lakes, Victoria, and Tanganyika. And second, trace the path of this mysterious Lualaba River. Nobody knew where it went. Some thought it was the source of the Nile, others guessed the Congo. And it's the second goal, the river, that would become the expedition's ultimate and deadliest obsession.
But honestly, to call this thing an expedition is a bit of an understatement. The sheer scale of it was just mind-boggling. Stanley wasn't leading a few local guides through the bush. He was mobilizing a small army.
And the centerpiece of this whole operation was the Lady Alice, a custom-built 40-foot-long boat designed to be taken apart into 5 heavy sections. This vessel was Stanley's key, the thing that would unlock the secrets of the lakes and rivers. But first, it had to be carried, piece by agonizing piece, for hundreds and hundreds of miles over land.
Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. The total weight of all the goods they were hauling, the cloth, the beads, the wire for trading, not to mention the ammo, tents, medicine, scientific gear, it all weighed a little over 18,000 pounds. That's 9 tons. 9 tons of material that had to be moved through thick jungle and swampland on the backs of human beings. And who is carrying all this? A column of 356 souls. We're talking men, women, even some children, recruited from Zanzibar and the coast, who all signed on for this journey into the great unknown. It was basically a moving city, a city whose population was about to be absolutely decimated.
There was this deep contradiction right at the heart of Stanley's leadership. On one hand, he promised his recruits he would be like a father and mother to them. But then, in his private journals, he's writing about needing strong, unbending force to tame and conquer what he called the Dark Brother. This tension, this pull between being a protector and being a tyrant, would define the entire brutal journey.
So, with all the promises made and this massive column assembled, they set off from the coast. And almost immediately, that romantic vision of glorious discovery just slammed headfirst into a far more savage reality. This was just a taste, a prelude to the horrors that were waiting for them down the river.
Take a look at this illustration from Stanley's own book. The title is Burying Our Dead in Hostile Ituru. There is no glory here. It's just a grim, necessary task, with armed men standing guard while they dig. It's such a stark image, and it shows you that death wasn't some abstract risk on this trip. It was a constant, daily companion, right from the very beginning.
But the most relentless enemy wasn't one they could fight with guns. It was disease. Smallpox, typhoid fever, dysentery. They just tore through the camp. As Stanley himself put it, never since leaving the sea were we weaker in spirit. We were an unspeakably miserable and disheartened band.
And the losses quickly became very personal.
This memorial marks the grave of Edward Pocock, one of Stanley's 3 young English assistants. He died just 2 months into the journey. For the rest of the men, it was this terrifying wake-up call that nobody, not even the white bosses, was safe. And it was a grim foreshadowing, because Pocock was just the first of Stanley's European companions to fall.
As the hardship and the desperation mounted, Stanley relied more and more on that unbending force he wrote about. When a man was caught stealing, Stanley didn't hesitate. He writes about it himself, with this cold, chilling detachment. The man was flogged right there in front of everyone. This was how Stanley would maintain control in the face of starvation and mutiny, a tactic he would use again and again.
So after charting the Great Lakes, which was a brutal ordeal in itself, Stanley turned his attention to that final, terrifying prize, the Lualaba River. He still had no idea where it went, but he was going to follow it to the end. But all the violence and hardship they had endured up to this point, that was just a dress rehearsal. The journey downriver was a descent into a 1,000-mile-long ambush.
Stanley's journey took him through moments of incredible, serene beauty, like this one. But on the Congo River, these moments were fleeting illusions. Placid water could be hiding deadly rapids just around the bend, and those quiet, lush riverbanks could erupt in a hail of poisoned arrows at any second. For months on end, there was simply no peace.
Encounters like this became a daily reality on the river. But instead of facing a few hundred warriors, they were met by thousands. War canoes, some big enough to hold 80 men, would just swarm them. Stanley actually records 32 separate battles as they fought their way downstream. His rifle, that powerful elephant gun, became his primary tool of diplomacy.
And a standoff like that would erupt into violence in a heartbeat. Stanley recounts this moment with just chilling clarity, describing how he shot a man who was about to throw a spear and then immediately ordered his men to just fire into the crowd. This became his standard operating procedure. He wouldn't wait to be attacked, he would strike first, ruthlessly, to inspire terror and clear a path down that river.
The cost of this river journey was just catastrophic. Drowning became common as their canoes were smashed to pieces in the 57 different cataracts they had to get through. Disease, fueled by near-constant starvation, claimed dozens. Fred Barker and Frank Pocock, Stanley's last 2 European companions, both died. Pocock actually drowned in the rapids just miles from their final destination. By the time Stanley reached the Atlantic coast, every single one of his European officers was dead. And of the 356 souls who started the journey, only 114 remained.
After 999 days, Stanley staggered out of the jungle and onto the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. He'd done it. He had followed the river all the way to its end, proving it was the mighty Congo. He had achieved his objective. But that achievement came at a staggering, almost unbelievable cost, which forces us to ask, what was the real price of this new knowledge?
And what you're looking at right here, this is the tangible result of all that suffering. On the left, a map from before the journey. It's vague, it's speculative, it's guesswork. On the right is Stanley's map. For the very first time, the path of the Congo River snakes across the continent with deadly precision. He had filled in the last great blank space on the map of Africa, but he traced its course in blood.
That monumental achievement, charting the lakes, that was really only the first act. The real story, the one that cemented Stanley's brutal legacy, was the conquest of the river. He solved the geographical mystery, yes, but in doing so, he kicked the door wide open for the horrors of European colonization that would soon flood into the Congo Basin.
This simple pile of stones, a memorial for Frederick Barker, it's an incredibly powerful symbol. It's a lonely marker for one European life that was lost. But for every one memorial like this, over 200 Africans who followed Stanley, the porters, the guides, the soldiers, the women, they died without a name or a marker. Their bodies were just left in the forest or swept away by the same river he was so determined to map. And this really brings us to our final question. Stanley's journey was an act of almost superhuman endurance that literally reshaped the map of the world. There's no denying that. But his own account reveals a relentless, horrifying trail of death, violence, and obsession. It forces us to ask, what is the true cost of discovery? And who ultimately is the one who pays the price?